There is an ancient principle in energy security. Never depend on a single supplier unless you are willing to accept their political terms without question. For 15 years, Spain believed it had solved this by diversifying away from Russia toward Algeria. But this week, Algiers closed the Medgaz pipeline that supplies 32% of Spanish gas. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algerian president, announced on December 26th the indefinite suspension of gas exports to Spain. Pedro Sanchez urgently flew to Algiers. Tebboune refused to meet with him, and Brussels just understood that its energy diversification strategy was an illusion built on equally fragile dependencies. I am a former International Monetary Fund analyst. I worked evaluating energy security risks when Europe built its post-Russia strategy in 2022. I saw the confidential reports that warned of this, that replacing Russian dependence with Algerian dependence simply changed the master. It did not eliminate the chain. And now, after investing 23 billion euros in Algerian import infrastructure, Spain freezes, while Algeria sells that same gas to China. The numbers are catastrophic. Spain imports 58% of its natural gas. Algeria provided 32% of the total, 22 billion cubic meters annually, valued at 18 billion euros. That supply just disappeared. And the European alternative, American LNG, costs double and has limited import capacity. This is not a diplomatic problem. It is an energy collapse that will reveal the complete fragility of Europe's post-Russia architecture. Let me show you exactly how Spain turned Algeria from reliable partner to vengeful adversary. Because what the corporate media doesn't want you to know is the systematic catalog of Spanish betrayals that precipitated this crisis. First betrayal: Spanish recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara in March 2022. For 47 years, Spain maintained diplomatic neutrality in the Sahrawi conflict. Algeria backs Sahrawi independence. Morocco claims the territory. Pedro Sanchez, under American pressure to distance himself from Algeria due to its Russian ties, recognized the Moroccan autonomy proposal as the most serious, realistic, and credible solution. Algeria immediately withdrew its ambassador from Madrid. The Polisario Front, backed by Algeria, condemned the Spanish stab in the back. Spain sacrificed half a century of relations with Algeria to please Morocco and Washington. Second humiliation: Spanish arms sales to Morocco increasing 300% between 2020 and 2023. Spain sold air defense systems, armored vehicles, and surveillance systems to Morocco, valued at 3,200 million euros. These weapons are deployed in Western Sahara, disputed territory that Algeria considers illegally occupied. Every Spanish tank in the Saharan desert is a direct provocation to Algiers. Spain armed its energy supplier's enemy. Third aggression: Spain-NATO-Morocco military cooperation, excluding Algeria. In June 2023, Spain hosted joint NATO military exercises in which Morocco participated, just 150 kilometers from the Algerian border. 32,000 soldiers, including 5,000 Americans, practiced operations in North Africa. Algeria interprets this as rehearsal for military intervention against it. Spain provided the basis for what Algiers sees as war preparation. Fourth betrayal: Spanish veto of Algerian participation in European Union green hydrogen projects. The EU designated 19 billion euros to develop green hydrogen imports from North Africa. Spain pressured for those funds to be channeled exclusively to Morocco, excluding Algeria. Spanish Ecological Transition Minister Teresa Ribera publicly declared that Morocco was a priority strategic partner for renewable energy. Algeria has double the solar capacity of Morocco. Spain chose politics over energy physics. Fifth humiliation: declarations by Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Álvarez in July 2022 calling Algeria a destabilizing actor at a NATO conference in Madrid. Albares accused Algeria of using energy blackmail by reducing supplies after recognition of Moroccan Sahara. This statement, while Spain still imported 32% of its gas from Algeria, was seen in Algiers as direct insult, while Spain still depended on Algerian generosity. Sixth aggression: Spanish pressure on Italy to reduce Algerian gas imports and increase American LNG. In August 2022, Pedro Sanchez and Mario Draghi, then Italian Prime Minister, coordinated with Washington to collectively reduce European dependence on Algerian gas, arguing Algeria's ties with Russia. Italy reduced Algerian imports by 18%, Spain by 24%, replacing them with American LNG. Algeria lost 32 billion euros in contracts, and now remembers every lost euro. So what happened? Algeria calculated that Europe, led by Spain, treated it as a disposable supplier when it no longer fit Washington's anti-Russian narrative, and decided that selling gas to China at $80 per thousand cubic meters is more profitable and politically safe than selling to Spain at 60, while Madrid arms your enemy. Tebboune did not cut gas on a whim. He executed a rational business decision after Spain destroyed all diplomatic goodwill. Now, the European Commission faces its worst nightmare. Without Algerian gas, Spain faces energy rationing this winter. Teresa Ribera, now European Competition Commissioner, submitted an emergency report. Spain needs 12 billion additional cubic meters immediately to avoid industrial blackouts. The only available sources: American LNG at doubled prices, or reconnect with Russia, which is politically impossible after 2 years of anti-Russian propaganda. Europe built its post-Russia energy strategy on the premise that alternative suppliers like Algeria would be geopolitically docile. That premise just collapsed. For 2 years, the European Union had a magic trick: replace Russian gas with Algerian gas, American and Norwegian LNG. They presented this as energy independence, but the reality was redistributed dependence. Russia supplied 40% of European gas pre-sanctions. Post-sanctions: Algeria 15%, Norway 24%, United States 18%, others 23%. Europe simply fragmented its vulnerability without reducing it. The European strategy had 3 pillars to secure post-Russia suppliers. First, offer premium prices over Asian market. Failed when China offered Algeria 30-year contracts at superior indexed prices, guaranteeing stable income versus European volatility. Second, link market access with political alignment. Failed when Algeria decided that aligning with BRICS provides access to markets of 4 billion people versus 500 million Europeans. Third, investment in suppliers' energy infrastructure. Failed when China invested $60 billion in Algerian energy sector between 2020 and 2024, 10 times European investment. Here is the devastating irony. Europe desperately needs to diversify suppliers to avoid energy blackmail, but it treated each alternative supplier with the same colonial arrogance it used with Russia. And now Algeria, like Russia before, is using the energy weapon that Europe believed it had neutralized. You cannot declare economic war on your energy suppliers and expect them to keep supplying at friendly prices. The Algeria-China agreement signed on December 15th has clauses that destroy European energy strategy. First, Algeria will redirect 45 billion cubic meters annually to China via new trans-Saharan pipeline connecting with Chinese-controlled Mediterranean ports. Second, China will pay in yuan, eliminating 12 billion euros annually from the European trade system. Third, China will build 3 gas liquefaction plants in Algeria, valued at $28 billion, giving Algeria capacity to export LNG globally without depending on European infrastructure. Russia, watching from Moscow, immediately offered strategic coordination with Algeria for joint management of gas prices in remaining markets. Vladimir Putin and Tebboune agreed in a phone call on December 29th that neither Russia nor Algeria will subsidize European energy with discounts. If Europe wants gas, it will pay Asian market prices plus political risk premium. Gazprom and Sonatrach, the Russian and Algerian state gas companies, are forming an informal cartel that controls 38% of world natural gas reserves. China, coordinating from Beijing, is consolidating its position as dominant global energy buyer. Xi Jinping understands that whoever controls energy demand dictates terms. Europe competes desperately for limited supplies. China buys with long-term contracts that guarantee supplier stability. China Development Bank approved $50 billion in financing for Algeria-China energy infrastructure. Europe offered $3 billion. The difference is strategic. China builds mutually beneficial dependence. Europe imposes political conditionality that alienates suppliers. The European Commission attempted 4 rescue strategies in 72 hours. First, diplomatic pressure on Algeria through the African Union. Tebboune responded that Algeria is a founding member of the non-aligned movement and does not accept external dictates. Second strategy, offer to annul recognition of Moroccan Sahara. Too late. Morocco already signed agreements with Spain valued at 19 billion euros that depend on that recognition. Third, request United States increase LNG exports. United States responded that its export capacity is maximized and new terminals will take 4 years to build. Fourth strategy, beg Qatar to increase supplies. Qatar demands 25-year contracts at fixed prices above current market. Europe, which criticized long contracts with Russia as dangerous dependence, now begs for exactly those conditions with Qatar. What you witness is the moment when the supposed diversification strategy collapses, revealing it was simply reorganization of vulnerability. Europe did not become energy independent. It changed suppliers without changing fundamental dependence. And each new supplier learned from Russia. Europe will punish any political disagreement with sanctions. Therefore, better to sell to clients who do not impose political conditionality. Now, I want to mention here John Mearsheimer, professor of political science at the University of Chicago. Mearsheimer argued in The Tragedy of Great Power Politics that great powers seek to maximize relative security, not absolute security. Europe sought absolute security, total independence from hostile suppliers. But the international system does not allow absolute independence. It only allows management of dependencies. Mearsheimer predicted that Europe's post-Russia strategy would fail because it did not address the structural cause. European dependence on resources it does not control. Kenneth Waltz added in Theory of International Politics that the anarchy of the international system means that alliances are temporary and depend on coincidence of interests. Europe assumed that sharing democratic values with Spain guaranteed Algerian loyalty. But Algeria is not a Western democracy. It is a rentier autocracy whose interest is maximizing hydrocarbon revenues. When China offered better terms without political conditionality, Algeria rationally switched clients. Waltz predicted exactly this behavior in 1979. Robert Keohane, theorist of complex interdependence, argued that deep economic integration reduces conflicts by creating mutual costs of rupture. Europe applied this theory with Russia pre-2022. Massive trade supposedly guaranteed peace. Failed. Europe applied the same logic with Algeria. Shared infrastructure supposedly guaranteed supply. Failed again. The error. Assuming symmetric interdependence where both sides lose equally with rupture, when reality is asymmetry, where Europe needs gas more than Algeria needs euros if China offers yuan. Connect this with the gas cut in the Mediterranean. Realist theory predicted that energy dependence creates vulnerability that suppliers will exploit when interests diverge. Europe ignored this by building post-Russia dependence identical in structure to pre-Russia dependence, and now pays the price with industries closing and households rationing heating. What the corporate media doesn't want you to know is that the Algerian cut exposes the systemic collapse of the complete European energy strategy. There are two pillars of that strategy: geographic diversification of suppliers, reducing dependence on any single source, and political conditionality, linking market access with geopolitical alignment. Both pillars are crumbling simultaneously. The first pillar, geographic diversification. Europe replaced 40% Russian gas with 15% Algerian, 18% American, 24% Norwegian. They presented this as success. But each alternative supplier has vulnerabilities. Algeria, internal political instability, growing alignment with Russia-China. United States, limited export capacity, prices 3 times higher than pipeline gas. Norway, declining production, reaching peak in 2025. Europe diversified toward less reliable or more expensive suppliers, not toward real security. The second pillar, political conditionality. Europe tried to use access to its market of 500 million consumers as leverage to impose political alignment. It worked for 20 years when Europe was the dominant global market, failed when China, India, Southeast Asia became larger and less politically demanding alternative markets. Algeria can sell to Europe with conditionalities, or to China without them. The choice is obvious. Concrete example. The Medgaz pipeline between Algeria and Spain cost 3 billion euros, built between 2005 and 2011. Capacity, 8 billion cubic meters annually. Spain assumed this infrastructure guaranteed supply because both sides invested. But Algeria can reconvert that gas to liquefaction plants and export as LNG to Asia. Investment in shared infrastructure does not create mutual dependence if one side has alternative markets. Europe believed that paying for pipelines bought loyalty. It bought only metal tubes. Another example, LNG regasification facilities in Spain. Spain invested 12 billion euros building 6 LNG terminals between 2018 and 2024 to import American and Qatari gas. Total capacity, 45 billion cubic meters annually. But LNG requires tanker ships, each transporting only 150,000 cubic meters. To replace lost Algerian gas, Spain needs 147 additional shipments annually. Transportation cost, 3 billion additional. Spain built massive infrastructure that does not solve dependence, only changes logistics at much higher cost. In Eastern Europe, panic multiplies. Poland, which celebrated abandoning Russian gas, now imports 42% of its gas as American LNG at prices that rose 60% since 2022. Hungary, which maintained contracts with Gazprom defying Brussels pressure, now pays 30% less than Poland for the same energy. Viktor Orbán, Hungarian Prime Minister, publicly declared that EU energy strategy is economic suicide disguised as moral principles. He is right. Europe sacrificed industrial competitiveness on the altar of geopolitical alignment, and each alternative supplier now exploits that desperation. In Italy, Giorgia Meloni faces similar crisis. Italy imported 29 billion cubic meters from Algeria annually, 43% of total imports. Algeria reduced Italian supplies by 23% in 2024, redirecting to China. Italian industries, especially steel and cement, are closing plants. 400,000 Italian industrial jobs are at direct risk from energy costs. Meloni flew to Algiers 3 times in 6 months. Tebboune met once, for 30 minutes without commitments. Italy discovers that Atlantic loyalty does not heat homes or feed industrial furnaces. The transition has already happened. The world simply has not realized it yet. Europe without reliable energy security is an economy deindustrializing in real time. And each alternative supplier understands that Europe has no options except terms dictated by sellers. Are you enjoying the analysis? If this content is revealing the truth that the media deliberately hides, subscribe to the channel immediately. Join thousands of people who are awakening to geopolitical reality. Like this video if you want more analysis without corporate filters. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching this from? How are these gas cuts affecting your local economy? Your perspective matters. Now let's connect this to your daily life, because this is not abstract diplomacy in distant capitals. This is hitting your wallet directly, your savings, your ability to heat your home this winter. If you live in Spain, your gas bills are rising vertically. Natural gas price in Spain was 18 euros per megawatt hour in 2021. In 2023, with Algerian gas flowing normally, it averaged 42 euros. Now, in January 2025, without Algerian supply, it reached 87 euros. Your monthly heating bill went from 90 euros to 215 euros. Annually, that is 1,500 euros additional per household. Spain has 19 million households. That is 28,500,000,000 euros extracted from Spanish domestic economy, money not spent on consumption, savings, or investment. If you live in Italy, your industries are collapsing. Italian steel production fell 32% in 2024 because steel mills consume gas intensively. Each ton of steel requires 300 cubic meters of gas. With gas at 80 euros per megawatt hour versus 40 before, producing steel in Italy cost 90 euros more per ton than in China. ArcelorMittal closed 2 Italian plants, laying off 12,000 workers. 30,000 additional jobs in the supply chain disappeared. If you work in Italian manufacturing, your job is directly threatened by this energy crisis. If you live in Germany, you are paying the bill for European solidarity. Germany increased gas exports to Spain and Italy to compensate for Algerian deficit. Germany re-exported 7 billion cubic meters in 2024, gas that Germany imported as expensive American LNG and then sold to European neighbors. German import cost, 62 euros per megawatt hour. Subsidized resale price to Spain, 52. Germany absorbs the difference, 2,800,000,000 euros in unbudgeted subsidies. That comes from German taxes or additional deficit that you eventually pay. Your investments are suffering. European energy companies like Naturgy in Spain, Eni in Italy, are seeing valuations collapse. Naturgy lost 42% of market value since the Algerian announcement. 8 billion euros in market capitalization evaporated. If your pension fund holds European utility stocks, you just lost a significant portion of retirement savings. Spanish state pension funds have 18 billion euros in energy companies. Those losses mean future benefit cuts or contribution increases. Food costs are also escalating. Intensive agriculture uses gas for fertilizers. 70% of fertilizer production cost is natural gas. With gas doubling in price, fertilizers rose 80%. Farmers pass those costs to products. Spanish wheat increased 42% in price since 2023. Italian tomatoes, 38%. Your weekly shopping basket costs 29% more than 2 years ago, and energy is the main component of that food inflation. But there is a brutal lesson in this chaos. Europe demonstrated that ideology does not replace material strategy. For 2 years, European politicians declared victories every time they signed a contract with a non-Russian supplier. But they never asked, does this supplier have a long-term incentive to maintain us as priority client? The answer was no. And now Europe learns that substituting one supplier for another without addressing structural dependence only postpones crisis, does not solve. For ordinary citizens, this means a future where energy is permanently more expensive. The era of cheap gas ended for Europe. Russia offered gas at 25 euros per megawatt hour for decades. Algeria offered 35. Those prices will never return. Now Europe pays 60 to 100 for inferior technology, LNG versus pipeline. That means permanent deindustrialization of energy-intensive sectors, steel, cement, chemicals, fertilizers. Those jobs will move to Asia, Middle East, places with reliable and affordable energy. It also means growing dependence on imports. If Europe cannot manufacture steel competitively, it will import from China. If it cannot produce fertilizers, it will import from Russia or Middle East. Each lost industry is additional trade deficit, eliminated jobs, technical knowledge evaporating. Europe is choosing to become a service economy because its politicians prioritized Atlantic alliance over industrial reality. But there is also hope for those who understand. A multipolar order where suppliers have client options means political conditionality no longer works. Governments will have to compete for resources with fair trade terms, not impose ideological alignment. For Global South countries, this is liberation from decades of Western dictates. Algeria choosing China over Europe is Algeria exercising sovereignty. The challenge is that transitions are chaotic. Europe will face probable recession in 2025 due to energy. That means unemployment, austerity, political instability. Populist parties will exploit crisis, blaming immigration or Brussels elites. But the real cause is strategic failure. Europe bet it could impose political terms on suppliers in a global market where alternative clients impose no conditions. Stay informed about these structural dynamics. When you hear European politicians promise energy security, ask, with which suppliers, at what prices, with what political conditions? If the answers are vague, they are lying or do not understand the problem. Energy is physics, not rhetoric. Either you have reliable access at competitive prices or your economy contracts. Follow this channel for analysis that connects geopolitics with real domestic economy. Share this video with friends who do not understand why their bills constantly rise. The official narrative will collapse when more Europeans see that Atlantic loyalty impoverished them while supposed adversaries prosper. You are witnessing how the foundations of the global energy order are being reorganized. Algeria's gas cut to Spain is not a bilateral dispute. It is a death certificate for Europe's post-Russia energy strategy. The question is not whether Europe can maintain its current energy model. It cannot. The question is how many jobs, how many industries, how much standard of living will be sacrificed before European leaders accept that the world changed, and they must negotiate as buyers in a seller's market, not as hegemons dictating terms to suppliers who now have better options.